I just made it. Wasn't much. So rush. It's bad.
Here, I'm cashing buttons, so we don't have. It's design change.
This morning. Yes.
For some.
I've had to come here.
I just left the message for Daniel.
Good. Oh, you've been. I don't know.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Village of Roscoe planning session. It's great to see all of you here. I'm Carol Gustafson, Village Mayor. This is my right trustee, Sue Petty, trustee, Justin Clark, trustee, William, trustee. Our presenters from Place Foundry
David Sidney.
Roscoe.
and Village Administrator, Bill Palinkas. I'm going. Okay. I'm going to send around a sheet of paper. We don't do roll, but if you would like to join the mailing list or want further information, just give us your name and the best way to reach your email. Okay, so I'll send it this way and then we'll be last when we're done. Great, thank you for coming this evening. We will begin. Were there additional agendas?
We have a few additional copies, so
I need to make a few
Is
more
everyone-
copies.
Greg, make some work. I think the back.
two of them.
That's fine.
But we got a few, we were pretty close.
And again, we thank you for coming and showing an interest. If you would like water, please help yourself.
The cookies are really good. So if you're tempted, there's pizza and water, but Carol, go ahead and get started.
Yes, please do. I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you, everybody who's come out to join tonight's planning session. This continuation in our journey, looking at Main Street and broader downtown Roscoe. And we've been on this journey from, so those of you who are new tonight, really, we started the process by really soliciting what is that preferred future for Main Street and the broader downtown area without even having any, sort of, this is what the defined downtown area is. But, in terms of Main Street, what could its future be for the village to really be a magnetic destination where residents here are constantly utilizing it this is your village hub, and then for it to be a destination to attract other commercial uses and other types of development along the corridor. So we did that, and then we started to really spend we have a multiple phased approach to this process. The first phase is a lot of analysis, a lot of deep dive and understanding what's the current state of downtown Roscoe, and even a little bit into the broader community. And also looking at, and that's everything from market conditions, the economic opportunities that are happening, maybe some barriers, things that the community has said in the past and the village leadership is saying in terms of how to move Main Street forward. And then looking at zoning and looking at all the things that's going to really ensure that this future can happen. And so that's been the first phase. We're actually coming to the end of that first phase, which has been heavy on market analysis and really understanding how the development components can take place within this defined area. The border is, I'll show you a map tonight, just so you can see, you have an agenda. We're going to walk through so as a work session with the trustees and leadership. We're going to start, with ultimately where we picked up 30 days ago in terms of something. We started talking really to deep dive into the market economic conditions of the downtown and Main Street area. So bringing that piece to a close and then starting to move into some initial early development concepts that really, in our world, we call it pop-up retail. It's very like tactical. It's easy to come up with a plan and say, this is what we would love for it to be, and these are the types of parks or structures or whatever, and that takes time, right? And so what are the things that we can be doing today to move towards a very vibrant Main Street? So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then the next steps, we'll be moving into phase 2 after tonight. So the work that we've done so far, as I said, we started with looking at a very broad area of Main Street, from where it connects further south, closer to Illinois 251, north to Elevator Road. And what the consensus was is that we really have a more defined area, about a block or so south of Bridge Street, and then all the way north to Main Street, north of Williams Drive. So this area here has really been what we've used as our working planning area for downtown, with Main Street really being the core of this process. So we are going to be showing at the end of this week, we will give you a much more detailed report from what we're showing you tonight that really walks through several things. We've had some really good discussions around the spatial and physical environment, which means we have opportunity, between the creek and what Main Street in terms of traffic flow and parking. We've looked at building lots and what are the opportunities for development. So really taking that spatial and physical environment overview of the demographics and marketplace analysis, and then moving into the housing component. We talked about what would it look like to have a Main Street that has sort of a mixed use feel to it, with commercial development on the ground floor, and housing on upper floors. We started, and then we just, last time we got together, we just started talking about zoning and land use, how to structure Main Street in a way that gets you to that preferred future. And you'll hear me say that over and over, because that ideal, what's in our minds, right? And then what does it take to actually achieve that? And tonight we're going to walk through a site where we help to see how the current zoning requirements get us to that future, or what are the barriers towards getting there. And then some initial recommendations that we want to suggest to the village around business incubation, tenant attraction, and the zoning and approval process for Main Street. So some recommendations that we've talked about and you'll see in the full report. The first, in terms of downtown zoning. You've done an excellent job throughout the village with your downtown zoning regs. You've made some adjustments along the way. We took a look at the entire zoning for Roscoe and then how it impacts downtown, the Main Street area. And as we'll show you later, the hodgepodge of zoning classifications and the limitations that can give you to getting to that preferred future. So we're actually going to tonight do a deeper dive and some recommendations around your zoning for Main Street. And we've defined it as a downtown core and a downtown edge, and we'll get into that a little bit more. The development approval process, to help the development community and property owners and those who are invested here as property owners, potential investors, that they have a level of predictability to be able to help achieve this vision for Main Street. So we have some recommendations for that. And then looking at your public infrastructure, one of the things you said last fall is we really need to look at how the future for Main Street, how does that impact the road network and road design, particularly for Main Street? So land use and engineering working together. And so we're at that stage now where we can really start to go back to the infrastructure plans for Main Street and see what possible modifications are needed. Some priority areas, which we'll show, we've talked about tonight. There's 2 sites in particular within this study area for practically getting off the ground within the next 12 months. And that really feeds into this idea of business attraction. The numbers that we'll walk through again briefly tonight shows you what you already know, right? You look at Main Street and you look at the commercial retail options that you have, a number of restaurants, right? The things that allow people to linger here longer is limited. And so how do we increase that? And then the stakeholder advocacy piece, really having a strong advocacy within the community for downtown, and then structuring, as we've said, a 501c3 that can really allow for all of this to work, as well from the funding side too. So there, funding to help see this vision go forward. 501c3 is going to be required for that. The last 2, I've already talked about really business incubation and then increased consumer demand. So one thing I wanted to talk about tonight that we didn't talk about last time as it relates to the market analysis, and I've already hinted at this, is when we threw out the number last time, we said there's 1 million visits that are happening within this area. Not visitors, but visits, the number of trips that are coming within this corridor and area. Well, when you dive deeper into what's actually happening, many of the visitors that are coming it's short term. It's 10 minutes or less. And that's good to have, but the 10 minutes or less is not lingering, right? So if you think about when you travel, when you go to other communities, or even when you're in downtown, right, you're going to 1, 2, multiple things. And so that's going to be more than 10 minutes. And so we need to increase the amount of activity that it's more than just 10 minutes and prioritizing those commercial uses. So, the numbers haven't really changed much, but we're hovering at this roughly 1 million visits since 2021. Some decline, but it's pretty steady in terms of, a little under 1 million visits in the last 12 months within this corridor. When you dive deeper into, when I talk about the 10 minutes, 10 minutes, longer than 10 minutes, shorter than 10 minutes. So shorter, 10 minutes or less is as an example in this study area would be the Casey's General Store on Bridge Street, right? By default, what it is in terms of being a general store and convenience store and a gas station, you're not usually there longer than 10 minutes. That's generating 561,000 visits, right? So when we look at that big number of close to 1 million, half is coming from the Casey's, right? So that's a good thing in terms of you brought in that type of a use, and it's upticked the number of frequency of people driving in and through this area, but that's half of the total visits for downtown. Sophia's is an example of lingering longer than 10 minutes. Now, some people are in and out for, for just pick up, carry out, but the long-term visits, right, 88,000 visits to Sophia's, and increasing those types of experiences where people are lingering longer in this area. Because when you come for one thing, you would like to generally, what's the next thing we can do, right? 2, 3, or 4. And that's when you start to get that vibrancy along Main Street. So I'm flying through because I know we did a deeper dive on the market stuff, but any thoughts or
I got a
questions?
comment, David. Looking around here, there's a lot of people. Last time we got together, there wasn't any people. And if we go back to when we started this whole process, I'd like you to share just a little bit more of your background and how we ended up in agreement with you, because, we have a vision, we want to do something, but how do you get from this vision to execute? I think that for here to kind of set the baseline for all the people that are joining us tonight, because this is a good turnout, to let them know why we entered into a contract, how we got started, and because all this makes sense, but maybe it's a good to set a platform for how your background and what you've done. Just briefly, just to have a baseline to get further.
Sure, yeah. So our company, Place Foundry, we're based in Rockford, and we help municipalities, economic development organization, property owners define a vision. So if that's at the community level, it's a district area, or it's a particular property, we help you to not only define that vision, but then to develop the strategies for implementing that vision. Our goal is to help you to get to groundbreaking on your vision. And so when we started our conversations last fall, the leadership said, this is what we have seen and have heard from the community in terms of how do we make Main Street in downtown Roscoe a higher priority, higher value to the community. And so it's easy to jump into the visualizations of like, oh, what could we do with this parcel or this property? Or, you really start to get into the design exercise. And what we do is we actually say we go slow to go fast. And I say that because that's the work that we've been doing up to tonight, is to go slow before we go fast in terms of understanding what is that preferred future that we're trying to get to. So we actually spent some time last fall together. For those of you who weren't in the room at the time, we just said, it was everything from like, when you think of like an awesome downtown of any size, what does it look like? Where is it at? Right. And so we have a map of, it's everything from Beloit to Geneva, St. Charles. I'm trying to think of some other, Carmel, some other cities across the country started to come to mind for people. And all of those downtowns are small, medium, and large. So then we broke it down. And what do you like about those places? And what do people generally like about when they're in a downtown village center area, and start to identify that and mapping that out. And so that's ultimate. So that's when I say preferred future. It's like, if I could just walk right into downtown Beloit, since that's close here, right? I know exactly what I'm experiencing today, but that today wasn't today 20 years ago. It took this kind of work and investors and property owners and leadership, governmental leadership, to say we have to have a cohesive vision and strategy around developing our downtown. So that's how we started, to say our future, but then we got to back up and to say, where are we at today? Let's understand who we are today, and let's understand what we're doing really well. Where are we succeeding, and then where are those barriers? So that's a little bit of a background about us, and then also the process leading up to today. So that's a pretty fast flyover for, I think, but.
Perfect. I think it's important because, one of the reasons Mike and I got involved as trustees, because back when we had an issue, we didn't see that there was a vision where everything was cohesively said, let's approve this, let's approve this. We got the zoning people here tonight as well, which never was connected before in the past. So this kind of gets the groundwork, so we know where we're going to go and why we approve things and why we deny things. If it doesn't fit into our vision, then we don't need to spend a lot of time with people who want to build a chicken coop, for example, that have come forward to us. So this is thanks for that baseline. But I think this is kind of a good recap of how we got started and where we are in that process.
All right, so for the housing piece, one thing, one point to bring out today is we did talk about this in our last session, but downtown Roscoe, this area here really has an opportunity to promote not only a denser but more diverse housing types. And we looked at some imagery last time, and we'll show you some tonight in terms of anytime you throw out the word density, that can scream multiple things. And we're not talking about density in terms of, you're going to have these tall towers everywhere. Density is really in terms of like the size of the housing units that you make available, right? And so when we looked at the market information last time, and for those of you who weren't here last time, you can see the trends of the amount of square footage that people are seeking in their housing types based on their family lifestyle has stabilized, but it's also declined. So that number is not so much as high as it used to be for whether it's single family, townhome, multifamily development. And then there are different ways in which you can get those types of housing units in the downtown area that really feels like a village center and not just some high density zone. But we think that that's going to be an important component to this area. Some examples of that, and there's a range. We're not saying this is what it's going to look like. This is really to help you to see when you talk about words like density, it can show up in different ways. You can have and then architectural styles too. Something that someone say would be much more modern, contemporary. Some people gravitate to that style of a townhouse or a row house or actually multifamily and go, oh, I really like that. And some people don't. And then on the other side, here's an example of multifamily, right? Where you have the classic walk up to up down. And these are increasing in popularity throughout the country. As people are looking at their housing options, different stage, housing prices continue to soar, which is good from a value standpoint, but it's very limiting into what people can actually get into. This is an example of multifamily housing adjacent to a downtown. This is an example of what we would call a courtyard style development, where you have single family homes that face a more public space, kind of communal gathering space. Sometimes this can be just private for the neighborhood, or it could be a part of a much larger residential layout. I believe this is from Bentonville, Arkansas. So I bring up Bentonville a lot because my family spent about a week and a half there, and I came back going, it's just in terms of the opportunity for development. Here's another example of multifamily housing, right? So you're seeing a variety. I'm trying to show when we say multifamily and when we say density, that can show up in different ways. And this is an example of how do you achieve in a much smaller area. And obviously you can see this is in a much larger downtown setting, but the scale of this multifamily development, where you have walk-up units on the ground floor and then you have access to the upper levels. Again, there's different ways to achieve. How do you get more people who are living in this area to help to support the commercial development that could happen along Main Street? And then this is another example of what we call a three level 1, 2, 3. And again, this could be on a main street or it could be right off of a main street. And then finally at the top here, I think this is in Carmel, Indiana, right? So when you talk about, a lot of times density, this is generally what our minds will go to first in terms of a pretty large residential structure, ground floor commercial space underneath. But then here you have examples again of how you get more narrow, smaller multifamily development. So there's a range in that discussion. We also talked about accessory dwelling units, which are great for, especially if you're in a situation where you have a single family house parcel, and you might even want to build an in-law suite, or you might want to, in some communities, you could actually rent it out in a very highly regulated way. And so these are examples of how that can show up in your backyard. And again, those are, and this is probably what, 500 square feet, maybe a little bit less. But again, there's different ways to get at adding people to support development and the commercial activity within the community. So we're going to spend, this is a very technical part of our time together, but we're going to do a deeper dive into the zoning, just to, and in terms some of our takeaways, some of our recommendations, but then we're also going to walk through the site at the corner of Bridge Street, one of the vacant parcels, to show you how you can currently, what you could currently achieve there on that site with your existing zoning, and then with some changes, what could actually happen there. I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm gonna take a little bit of time today to go a little bit deeper into Roscoe's current zoning, right? The current regulations that dictate land use, particularly how they relate to downtown, how we look at zoning as really an integral part of planning in downtown, and kind of what are some initial recommendations on our part. Before I do that, I want to go back to some of the data that we found about housing in Roscoe and in the broader region, right? Because this really underscores why we believe it's important to really critically assess what zoning regulations are in place for downtown Roscoe. When we look at the trends over the past couple of years, and especially really just the past few years, we're seeing that this is a community that's seeing a lot of growth for its size. And many of you may have seen recent articles. The Rockford region was just named the hottest housing market in the country, which is something that maybe some of us were thinking about in terms of there's a lot of folks moving in here, but the data really backs that up. And we're seeing Roscoe especially become this really attractive place for folks to live, right? We got at that at our place coaching session a few months back. A lot of you mentioned that, you're seeing more and more folks moving here from the Chicago metro area or other big metro areas, looking for the kind of community that Roscoe has to offer, a tighter knit, more close-knit community. And so what we're seeing is that immense growth that this village and the wider region is seeing. However, we're not seeing housing development catching up with that. And what that's doing is that's creating a lot of pressures on the housing market in Roscoe and the wider region. We're seeing housing prices kind of shoot up in the village and across the region. And we're seeing that the housing development that's happening is really narrowly focused on single family and 2-unit homes. Now, those are important for a lot of people, especially families who are wanting to move in. But that's really limiting in terms of attracting folks to your village and to the rest of your downtown, right? Single family development is generally less dense. It requires more resources per housing unit. And it also doesn't really meet the demand of a lot of folks coming in. What we're seeing in the housing data is that the demographics of the community are changing too. You're getting a lot more non-family residents coming in who are going to want smaller house units like townhomes, like apartment blocks. And as of right now, it's really hard to find that. And if you do find it, it's very expensive for a lot of folks. So it's a very limiting factor when it comes to the growth and the sustainability of the Roscoe community. And so I wanted to get at that because zoning is a really critical part of that discussion. And zoning is ultimately what allows for development, whether it's of housing or commercial development, to go forward. And so that's why we wanted to dive really deep into zoning in downtown Roscoe, and what are some potential paths forward. So a couple key takeaways from our study, looking at right now, a lot of downtown Roscoe, the study area that we pointed out, is specifically reserved for single family and 2-family development. And so that's something that when we talk about those downtowns that we really enjoy, when we talk about downtown Beloit or all of these, Fentonville, Arkansas, right? These are highly walkable places, sure, But they're also places that have a rich diversity of housing stock. You have wonderful looking row homes, you have 3 apartment buildings, you have larger apartment buildings, all interplaying in this really vibrant downtown area and also crucially mixed in with commercial development. Right now in Roscoe, we're seeing that the majority of land in the downtown area is zoned for single family development only. And so that's something that's really limiting when we're talking about the potential vibrancy of downtown Roscoe. We're also looking at where multifamily development is allowed. That is really restrictive as well. So yes, theoretically, the multifamily zoning district, which pops up across downtown Roscoe, does allow for more than two housing units. There are a lot of kind of smaller development regulations that really don't make it feasible to build above a certain amount. And so even though nominally, you're allowed to build a multifamily development on these parcels, there's a lot of additional regulations under the hood that make it very hard for property owners and developers to do so. So one thing we did come across is that Roscoe does have a mixed use commercial district, so the retail and service commercial district. And I'll show a map of how this shows up in a little bit, but so it's definitely the case that Roscoe has thought about how do we enable mixed use development? How do we enable that kind of walkable, commercial on the ground floor, residential on upper floors, that classic downtown image that we know. But again, when you look under the hood of that existing mixed use district, there are certain key regulations that just make it very hard to build the kind of downtown that you want to see. Some other things that we looked at are really getting at, Roscoe is not going to transform from what it is today to a, perfect downtown Main Street overnight, right? These kinds of things, as David mentioned, take decades really to really put, I know. But it takes a long time, it takes a lot of planning, but there are tactical improvements that you can make in the interim, right? There are accessory uses that you can allow, right? A lot of municipalities have had success with allowing small commercial structures in front of single family homes as a way of kind of jump-starting that economic activity on their main streets in what was originally just a very low density residential street. And so again, this is something that's not really accounted for in Roscoe's zoning code and something we want to address today. So looking at the map of Roscoe's current zoning, there's a patchwork of different districts going on here, and a patchwork of allowed uses throughout the downtown area. So you'll see here in the kind of beige, this is single family zoning. So the only thing you're allowed to build here are single family homes on each of these lots. So like I mentioned, that's really restricting for the kind of development that can occur. You can't build, for instance, even on the smaller scale, you can't build something like this building here with 2 apartments and commercial on the ground floor in any of these districts, or on any of these parcels. And so for the center of your municipality, that's really limiting code. In pink here, you'll see this is that mixed use district, right? So this is where nominally mixed use development is allowed in downtown Roscoe. But again, we're going to walk through a case study of a parcel in downtown. So this one right here on Main Street that is currently zoned as general commercial. And so just to kind of show you what are some of those regulations that make it hard to develop the kind of development you see. So, this is a currently vacant parcel, kind of right in the heart of your downtown, right? And so this is really a prime parcel to build that kind of mixed use development that you want to see, or even just residential development. So right now it's zoned as general commercial. So general commercial is intended for single use commercial structures. So this could either be a single restaurant or it could be a retail strip with a couple of different commercial units. But right off the bat, this is a scenario in which this is what would be allowed to be developed on that parcel under the current zoning. If you were to build a restaurant, you could only build it up to 3,000 square feet because you would need 40 parking spaces per the current zoning regulations. Now, a lot of restaurants will not build a site for 3,000 square feet. They're gonna want a larger space. They're gonna want a larger amount of green space and patio than this strip. And then furthermore, what this does is it really creates a building that's isolated from the rest of the downtown footprint. You've got this kind of small structure surrounded by a sea of parking. That's not something that promotes walkability, that promotes accessibility, that doesn't create that downtown fabric that you want to see. Now, an alternative is that you could build just retail, no restaurant space, but downtowns really thrive with that kind of restaurant space. But if you build just retail, you need less parking, yes. Just 24 spaces, but again, you have more than half of the parcel being occupied by off-street parking. That's not very attractive for a developer that wants to come in and, actually have a profitable business endeavor here. So then what we looked at is, okay, what if we changed this parcel to Roscoe's current mixed-use district, that's retail and service commercial district? Well, you could theoretically build that same amount, 6,000 square feet of retail with 6,000 square feet of residential up top. But because of the off-street parking requirements that Roscoe has, you would need 8,000 additional square feet of property to accommodate the parking that's required. And so this isn't really tenable because there's a house that's right here. And so this is, this, again, it's just kind of underscoring that even within the current structure that you have that allows for mixed use development, these little things like parking requirements, like setback requirements and yard size requirements, all these things play into a very difficult environment to develop mixed use. So what would have to be done? You'd have to build a 8,000 square foot mixed use building. This is not a very financially feasible development for a lot of folks. This is a lot of costs that you have to put into parking, into building up for really only 8,000 square feet or potentially even less of leasable space. So then finally we looked at, well, what's an alternative, right? This is not, what we're showing here is, okay, you could theoretically build a building that wraps around both Main Street and Bridge Street. So it has that street front presence on both sides of the corner there. It's highly walkable. You've got a mix of retail and restaurant space on the ground floor. You've got plenty of residential space to bring folks into the core, living in the core of Roscoe. But what does it require? It requires fewer off-street parking sites. It requires more reliance on on-street parking. And it also requires more walkability, more folks from the Roscoe community coming in and taking advantage of the village's walkability. So this is what we're saying here. This would be a scenario in which the village would require one parking spot per residential unit and would not require off-street parking for commercial development within downtown. Now, that's not necessarily what we're recommending in this first phase. We still need to go through some more analysis and do this kind of parcel by parcel to really come at those concrete numbers. But this gives you a sense of, if you want to see the kind of development that other municipalities are benefiting from, these are the sorts of changes that need to be thought about, right? And, starting to get at those parking requirements and those setback requirements, right? Before I move on, are there any questions about that scenario, about Roscoe's current zoning, framework?
Started out at 3,000 square feet, now you're up to over 8,000 square feet with less parking.
Yes,
Plus the 16,000 residential.
that's correct.
All on that one parcel in the corner there.
Yes.
Just by changing zoning for more density.
And not even just changing the parking requirements. So that's even a small rule like that, because right now, within Roscoe, if you want to build out restaurant space, you need to build one off-street parking spot for every 75 square feet, 75 square feet of restaurant space. That's a lot of parking that you have to build out. And for a lot of developers, that's just not feasible. That's too much money that you have to put into asphalt. It's uncertain whether you're going to get that money back.
This is, in this scenario, trying to show that, how do you get to that vision for that intersection And then what is actually going to work on the pro forma side, the financial side, right? How much square footage do you have available to lease for retail, to lease for apartments, right? So this is what we're, there's probably other iterations that we could do, but this was a way to say, all right, we could start to make some tweaks to the regulations and start to actually get to something that's a little bit financially a good return on investment for an investor and the property owner. There was another, and then
Yeah.
the third.
What study was done to determine that this is what residents actually want? I think people want to live in a single family home on at least a 1 acre lot. So, I mean, what makes you so sure that residents of Roscoe really want all of this downtown?
So,
Is there a study that's been done and is it available to the public to actually read?
so we did not do a study of the residents of all of the village. What we did is to say for the Main Street corridor, what we're talking about when we say the single family, the desire to live in a single family house, we're not saying to eliminate those options. We're talking about on Main Street here in the downtown core, you can't achieve the level of density to support the type of downtown.
But who said that that's what the residents want? I mean, where's that?
We're working with the trustees and the leadership here, right? That's where we're getting that direct and indirect feedback on what do people want to see along Main Street.
So one thing I will say to that note is we did look at a lot of census data when it came to housing and what is housing demand in the community and across the region. And this is getting at that desire for non-single family homes. What we found is that Roscoe is seeing a shift in demographics to more single family, non-family householders, to more renters, and also to older residents. And what we're seeing is that this is a pattern that's happening across the country, right? A lot of these smaller communities, their demographics are changing, and also the housing preferences of folks are changing, and they want a greater diversity of housing product. So we didn't do a resident by resident survey of folks in Roscoe, but what we did do was look at what is the underlying data that's pointing to a need in a housing shift. And we're finding that folks that are moving into the area, a lot of folks moving in from the Chicago metro area and from within Winnebago County. And these folks aren't just looking for a 3,000 to 4,000 square foot single family home. They're looking for smaller, even if it is a single family home, right? They're looking for smaller residential structures, a lot of older residents that are looking to downsize into into a smaller home. And so what we're saying is not necessarily tear down downtown and build all new mixed use developments, but make it so that it's possible for a property owner who wants to make that decision and wants to develop it, make it possible for them to do so.
Well, so you're saying people are moving here to get away from density and yet you want to add density?
Well, we can't say exactly that they're moving away from density. That's something we can't assert at this
What
stage.
we're trying to do is to point to the market realities of what are people when they're searching for places to live, irrespective of where they're coming from. It's like in terms of what type of house lifestyle they're looking for. They're looking for a townhome, row house, single family, apartment, right? That product that people are looking for. So we're looking at that information through this study. And one of the things I think we talked about in the first session is the opportunity for Roscoe as we have a chart that shows the trend line, the increase for aging residents who want to downsize, have this as an option for an area within your community for downsizing. So that's something we want to make sure we capture.
You're talking just tonight, it's just this downtown area, right?
Right, just the
Yes.
downtown area. We're not talking about the entire village.
And again, when it comes to zoning, zoning doesn't have to require a certain kind of thing be built. And what we're looking at is how do we make zoning a little bit more flexible? Because ultimately it resides with the property owner. A property owner has the utmost freedom to do with their property as they wish according to zoning, right? And so if a property owner currently lives on in a single family home or owns a parcel with a single home and they say, I want to build 2 to 3 more units on this parcel. What we're saying is the village can and should allow for that, not necessarily require it, because that's not the kind of village that this is, but allow for that and allow for property owners to make those informed decisions on their own according to an established vision and an established plan. We're gonna get into some more of those aspects of what's gonna make that successful. But yeah.
I just was checking up for clarity, if I understood the picture that you shared earlier, it looked like it had 3,000 square feet at the beginning at the intersection, I think, of Bridge and Main Street.
Yes.
So this is, the original unit was like 3,000 square foot restaurant. And then you went and showed some alternates for that same space.
Mhm.
And one of the things it appeared is that it just went more up when you
Yes.
split the residents the same. Which raised the question in my mind, well, if you can go up, why can't you go down with the maybe a parking lot with a multi-level parking lot down below it? Close.
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely could, but that's a very expensive, that is quite expensive, and when we're looking at kind of returns on residential development, you know, if you're building, so let's say we go with this scenario here, you know, we're looking at 16,000 total square feet, so 16 apartment units potentially at about 1,000 square feet each. You know, it's just very difficult to justify building that underground parking deck. It's a very expensive intervention. Not to say that that's not possible. What we're saying is we don't necessarily want to have the village have that as a barrier to development, because that's going to discourage folks from really wanting to develop their property.
Wouldn't it discourage folks from moving in there if they didn't have a place to park their cars?
Well, one thing that Main Street does benefit from is quite a lot of on-street parking. There's right now many spaces along that strip that folks can take advantage of. And one thing that we've talked to the village about is, you know, what are some shared parking solutions that you could have? You know, we're looking at a potential site where you could bring in potentially a shared parking lot that visitors and residents could utilize. So what we're saying is maybe not necessarily making sure that every single development has exactly enough parking units for every possible eventuality, but how can we make the parking situation across downtown a little bit more flexible? How can we take advantage of shared parking areas? And also take advantage of the fact that you have multiple bike trails and walking paths that folks can take advantage of to get here.
And this,
Right now, though,
yeah, what's that?
because you got that house right over here, here it's gonna be coming down.
Yeah.
They just took all the trees and everything down. So that's just gonna be a parking lot?
No, it's going to be a multi-use gathering space. So I haven't heard the explanation.
Yeah.
We have designed this so that it can be used for a multitude of purposes. Roscoe does not have a downtown area where people can linger and gather for outdoor functions. And that's the intent of this. So it will have a combination of, when needed, some parking, and when we have a celebration, and that celebration can be a multitude of things. If there's supposed to be, you know, a Christmas snow market, for example, can be there. Or if someone wishes to host an outdoor music event, it can happen in one little area. The whole idea was to create some attraction to get people, those 500,000 people, momentarily stop at Casey's, to go down the block a little bit, linger, and maybe spend some time and then some money. And when we look at Main Street, and Main Street is just a finite area, I know all of you realize that there are a lot of old houses there. And what has happened? People snap them up and turn them into insurance businesses. They sit on 1 acre tracts of property or more. And we hear from individuals that, 1, we don't like that. 2, we would like to have attractions downtown where we can walk, where we have a restaurant, where we have some retail area, something that brings people and dollars into our community. So to say density conjures up all kinds of, as our team leaders here have said, misconceptions. You can still buy a 1 acre, quarter acre, third acre, whatever size you want, anywhere in the village of Roscoe. But we are looking at a finite area downtown that is currently in transition. Old housing stock, lots that go back to well before, what, 1965, when the village was founded. And the fact that we hear from individuals, as I said, they want to be able to have a downtown instead of a pass-through area.
You know, one of the things that they brought up in the last meeting, it's 17 million down 251 every year, I think was the number. 4 million people down Main Street. You know, and having been around here, you look at Rockton, it's very attractive. There are places to go there for nightlife, for entertainment. Here, I grew up in Beloit, and I always wondered, well, where's Roscoe downtown? Well, there isn't really one. What we have downtown is the fire station, the village police station. But how do we take these properties? Like some of these properties have been sitting vacant on Main Street for a number of years. And one, for example, I think this property over here, we analyze, can we use the property? Well, it turns out that the village responsibility on some of those properties based on asbestos and other things, we don't have an option as maybe a resident might have because of the studies we have to do to remove it. Took us forever behind us here to remove a building and after it was burned down, just because of the requirements the state has on us. The other thing is, I certainly wasn't aware before I became a trustee. We send 10% of our tax dollars, or we send our tax dollars to Illinois. We used to get 10% back in grants. Now we don't get 10% back, we get 4% back. And now they're talking about taking away the grocery tax so that you schnucks which finance. So what happens is villages are under a lot of pressure with no revenue to provide roads and streets and things that we enjoy now. So how do we make it a little bit more attractive so that people aren't just going to Rockton or to McChesney Park and doing their shopping? Because we support residential housing. I mean, that's why Mike and I are on board, because of the multi-family that was agreed to, which didn't make sense. We had the school boards objecting to it. But we think it should be in places that are desirable, that it's going to draw businesses and residents to spend more time here. So we are not doing willy-nilly tearing down things. As Carol pointed out, we have investors coming in and we did not approve a lot of things that we know are not going to fit our long-term vision. When we had hired David here to help us get from, okay, how do we turn this into a desirable place for the reason why we live here in the residential areas, but how do we make it a little bit more attractive to bring other people in? And this is just one of the 3 target areas. But anyway, thanks for your question. Thanks for.
What is your vision for downtown? I've been here 28 years. It hasn't changed. Give me,
Well, it seems to be drawing people. I mean,
it isn't.
I moved here because I like the static nature of it. I don't want to see it be another Beloit or, you know, I certainly don't want to see a 3-story. It will end up being a low income place because they're not gonna have a farm.
Oh,
Well,
That's
I-
logistic or the data that we found here. In fact, Roscoe's income level and residence is higher than Rockton and South Beloit. And you take a look at Beloit where the income has exceeded, it's gone up because of what they've done there. Now they have 20 years and they have a lot of money.
That's occurred organically due to the, you know, the architectural layout of the town. We don't have that. By putting in some of what you're, you know, proposing, I know you're gonna jump to the drawing on Bridge Street. And I mean, I will give you several reasons why I think it's.
Okay, well, appreciate it. Well, let's move on. Thank you for your comments.
So I think, you know, one thing that we want to stress here is again, that we're looking at downtown as a way to have residential growth in a controlled manner, right? We're looking at downtown as a strategic area where we can start to introduce some of these mixed use developments, some of these slightly higher density housing options. And we've taken examples from a lot of communities across the country who have done this successfully and done it in a way that local community members have been very satisfied with the way it's been implemented. And so, we take examples from communities like Bentonville, like Beloit, who have really strategically looked at their zoning codes and said, how can we take a little bit more, how can we allow for more development, but take a little bit more ownership of this process? So what we're proposing in this report is that downtown be the site for 2 new zoning districts, a downtown core district, which would be in a sense a modified mixed use district, that one that Roscoe already has, that service and retail commercial district. This zoning district would only be applied within the boundaries of downtown as we've defined them here. And again, they wouldn't require any existing property owners to change anything about their property. A lot of zoning codes do have that in place. If they make a zoning change, that it would require changes from the property owners. That's not something that we're arguing for here. And again, these simply just allow for additional kinds of development. They don't require it. The second district would be a downtown edge district. This would be strictly residential. It would allow for that slightly higher density multifamily development. It would be a modification of the existing multifamily residential district. So just getting into it a little bit right now. Some of the requirements that we're looking at when we're looking at modifying these zoning districts. For instance, when we look at this downtown core district that we're proposing to modify the existing CR district. Right now, there is a minimum site area requirement. So parcels that are zoned CR need to be at least 10,000 square feet to develop on them in any fashion, right? There are a lot of parcels within the downtown footprint that don't meet that requirement. So that in essence makes multiple parcels downtown, even for single family development, undevelopable based on existing regulations. So you can't even build a single family home or a lower density home, even if you wanted to. It's undevelopable. And they also, when we're looking at building multifamily or mixed use development, there's also a requirement that says parcels need to have at least 3,300 square feet of land area per dwelling unit. So again, it makes it so that some of these parcels, which would be really ideal for, let's say, 4, 5, 6 apartment units, it would make it so that some of these smaller parcels couldn't fit something like that. And you couldn't get some of those really charming buildings that are just commercial on the ground floor and 2 apartments up top, or even something slightly larger. We're also looking at removing all front, rear, and side setback requirements. When we look at the downtowns that are really attractive to a lot of folks, they don't have these front, side, and rear setbacks, right? They have development that comes up to the street that's really engaging with a pedestrian. It creates this sense of intimacy and walkability, something that's really charming in a downtown and that a lot of people gravitate towards. Again, this is not saying that a developer couldn't build further back if they wanted to. It's just saying you're not required to have a setback. Right now in the existing mixed use district along Main Street and Bridge Street, there aren't any front setback requirements. But there are those rear and side setback requirements. And then, we talked about this earlier, getting at removing those parking requirements. So right now for a mixed use development, there are 2.5 spaces of parking required per dwelling unit, something that's just far above what's necessary in a downtown area. It really just creates a lot of space that has to be devoted to parking. And we're also looking at things like lot coverage maximums, right? How much of a parcel can you build on? Right now in the CR district, that maximum is 60% of a total lot area. Municipalities that have seen success with rezoning have gone even higher than that. And so that's something we're going to explore in these next phases. We're not necessarily proposing any concrete numbers just yet, but some of the things that we're just starting to explore. Within the downtown edge district, we're similarly looking at those same requirements. Minimum site area requirements for multifamily development are 19,800 square feet. That's quite a lot of parcel, and again, makes many parcels undevelopable in the downtown area. Again, lowering those front, side, and rear setback requirements and lowering those off-street requirements for residential uses and those lot coverage requirements. Before I move into this, any questions around that? Yes.
So have you looked at or are you gonna discuss why some of those requirements might be in the code currently? I mean, we don't want to toss out, there was some reasons they put them in.
No, absolutely. I mean, we have taken a lot of time looking into the code and trying to understand what is the preferred future based on that current.
So I was just kind of thinking about, at some point, they put parking requirements in. What would be the reasons for doing so?
Putting the parking requirements in do allow for lower density development. It makes a community a little bit more car friendly. This can be seen as a good thing, but when it comes to building out a downtown commercial district, that's something that can get in the way of walkability. We've got two opposing forces there.
And have you looked at, as you look at the economics, of what somebody could build?
Yes,
If the setbacks go away, then you're gonna increase some fire requirements for access to your fire apparatus. You got some extra cost for sprinklers or firewall.
yeah, absolutely.
And front setbacks are at some point along your streets is where you have your infrastructure, your sewer, maybe no one has phone needs anymore, but they still need fiber optics, those things.
Yeah, so when we say going up, so to that last point, when we say going up to the street, I mean, literally, if you walk out these doors, right, you have your sidewalk, all of your public infrastructure is in that right of way. That's what this building has a 0 setback. So this building would be in alignment with what is typical along a main street. So that's what we're talking about there. In terms of the zoning requirements, what we're trying to do tonight, we're not recommending that this becomes law. What we're saying is that in order to get to this being, 0 setback type, more of a reality for development along Main Street, allowing for more commercial retail space, restaurants, and then adding housing, right? These are the kinds of requirements we have to look at shifting. It's still going to require the community and the leadership, right, to say, we're not saying swing all the way to no parking requirement, right? That's just not possible. We would not recommend that. But we do think to have 2.5, what we see when we calculate, right, is it restricts you from getting to exactly what we're trying to achieve on Main Street. We're not saying for the broader community, but on Main Street in this area. So those ratios have to be discussed, zoning, right? We need to, that's where we're going to have to do the deeper dive, say what is the right percentages, what's the right ratios for this area. So it's a range right now, but we're narrowing in and saying, and that's where, really the next steps with the trustees leadership to say, what do you think? We're just trying to get reaction right now. So does that answer that question for you? Okay.
So another thing that we wanted to look into is, okay, say you put these requirements, some form of these requirements in place, right? A revised mixed use district, a revised multifamily district that applies to the downtown area. Well, there's also the desire to see a certain kind of development, a certain character of development. And so this is where something that a lot of municipalities have been working with and have seen a lot of success with could come into place. These are pre-approved building plans. So the first step is identifying, well, what are some of the buildings that we'd want to see downtown? Well, maybe we want to see some additional 3 to 4 story mixed use structures that would fit on a smaller lot. Maybe we want to see duplex buildings that pop up in and around Main Street. Maybe, or, stacked duplex buildings. Maybe we'd want to see accessory dwelling units that someone could build in their backyard and make additional rental income, allow for their extended family to live in, right? All of these alternative housing implementations that could be really successful in Roscoe. So how does the village kind of help to foster that and also take some ownership over that process? So this is where we're recommending that the village explore this option of pre-approved plans. And so, for instance, these are some examples of pre-approved plans in South Bend, Indiana, right? They looked at, okay, we want to encourage more development within our municipal area, and we want to try and introduce some housing options that are, bring in a little bit more housing, but are not super high density, that still fit within the character of a traditional neighborhood, right? So this is potentially a sixplex apartment building that's what this does also is it creates a lot of clarity for property owners and developers. They know that coming into this market, they say, I can choose this plan that's been approved by the Village of Roscoe, and I can just go ahead with it. This plan is pre-approved for construction. And so that helps to give a lot of predictability, a lot of clarity for property owners and developers coming in. And it, again, gets rid of some of those barriers to development and those lengthy approval procedures that discourage development. Here's an example of another pre-approved plan for a duplex building, right? Something that very much has the character and look of a single family home, but doubles the amount of rental units in an area, something that fits very well within the character of a single family neighborhood. They've also looked at accessory dwelling units, right? Something that someone who owns a single family home could build in their backyard. And so this is not necessarily just to rent, but say you have extended family that would like to live with you, but have a separate space from you and still live on the same parcel. This is a great opportunity to build that additional dwelling unit on your property. And so we've seen a couple of other cities, do work around this. These are pre-approved plans from the city of Los Angeles, California. Again, a city that is at a much different scale than Roscoe, but still facing a lot of the same pressures and issues around housing, skyrocketing housing prices, and a lot of pressure on their market that Roscoe is seeing today. And so these pressures are going to continue to catch up to the village without a concrete and kind of determined plan around housing development. But again, these plans can come in multiple different styles, but this gives the village the opportunity to say, we want to see additional housing development downtown, but we want it to have a certain look, we want it to have a certain character, and we want to take ownership over that process. So this is one of those tools that we've looked into that could allow the village to implement that. So before we move on to the next section, any questions around that?
You get better looking buildings than those.
Sure, yes. These are not necessarily the examples that the Village of Roscoe would adopt, but it goes to show kind of the variety of, we've seen very modern.
That is an example. That's, to me, that looks like pretty low income stuff.
Storage shed.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Thank you for that feedback.
We've been there. So.
And, the architectural style, that's the opportunity that you have as a community is to, the pre-approved plans, right? You can be able to show the style of architecture, the range of architecture. The goal though is predictability. Right, it's predictability, especially to the property owner investor that says, wow, if I am able to build to this standard that the community has set, right? I know it's not going to be a 12-month process. It's going to be whatever that timeline is. But thank you for the feedback on the imagery. Yeah. Again, we just want to show this is again that part, like we said, the showing the variety of housing product. And I'll just say this personally, when I lived in a loft apartment before I got married, and when we got married, it was like, oh, this is not going to work out. This is too small, right? Those are the realities and stages of life. But I didn't want to jump to a single family house right away. And that community missed out on the opportunity for me to have a townhome, right, which I would have purchased before the single family. I'm in a single family home now. I'm saying all this is because it's really about how do we really as a community here, right, the different stages of life. And I'm actually really interested in the downsizing part where you actually could limit people who really love being here, and you've either known this to be your home and community, or you moved here for a reason, and then you're going, I don't know if we can be in this size of a house forever, but you don't want to leave. And so to be able to give those options. So actually for me, I'm really interested in how this downtown area could help capture some of that market. Sorry. Step right in.
So with that, that kind of concludes the scope of this phase one of work. So again, we are anticipating later this week releasing that document that really is the culmination of this first stage of research. So again, everything and more that we talked about today is going to be included in this report. It's quite extensive. It really gets into detail on the market analysis, some of those economic factors driving the growth of Roscoe. And what are some of those limiting factors for the growth of Roscoe? Really gets into the housing data and showing what are those changes that are happening to the community right now. And again, all of this information on zoning that we've shared today.
Is that report available to?
Yes.
It will be.
The other item that I would like to add when we're talking about downtown and retail housing. When I first took office, there were 5 different interested parties that came in to discuss. One, I want to open a business in downtown Roscoe. 2, the emphasis, there was no place to do it, nothing to rent, and they very greatly disappointed. The passion to locate here was so strong, but the lack of success rental or even a place to build was very disappointing to them. So they went elsewhere. And then secondly, when it comes to housing, we've had developers come through and time again, they tell us the market is dictating fewer square footage because the prices are so high. And so many people need to get into housing and they cannot afford the traditional 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath house with 3-car garage on 1/3 acre that many of us have. It's just the reality. So even in our far-flung, further apart from downtown subdivisions, there is this movement to downsize everything. And it's not anything we're doing. It's being dictated by market forces. And if we don't encourage our population to grow, we don't grow our tax base. And if we don't grow our tax base, we cannot provide services. So,
Can I ask a quick question? So I took the time to read the last 3 years of minutes from every meeting here. I haven't seen one thing where anybody came to the board and said, hey, I need more parking. Hey, I'd like to open a business here. So is there another place that information is recorded that I could review?
they visit and talk to me. They don't come to the board. They make an appointment, they come into the president's office, they sit down, they pitch an idea, we try to put them together with people, sometimes even giving them a list of parcels that they can explore, putting them together with builders, things of that nature. Usually works out one-on-one conversation. And when my
Yeah.
I just had a conversation with a guy that we just lost a $15.3 million building. He's going to South Beloit. Really? He wanted downtown. There's nowhere to put him. Retail and what you guys are talking about, space up top.
Yeah, I know, I got the call from the guy, he wanted to buy one.
It could have been, but there's a couple guys.
Whatever.
And the unfortunate thing, what frequently comes here are individuals who want 6 gaming machines. And that's it. And so we have a greater vision than 6 gaming machines. Or, as I said before, I have nothing.
But if they want to have that development, they need that to be in it, it would be approved. Or not.
Well,
It depends, location.
Well,
And
It's not enough, yeah.
I'm just asking, you know, if a guy's got a vacant building and he wants to put in gaming machines and he wants to sell sandwiches, can he do that?
not if he's right next door to 2 or 3 more that do it. Not if it's right here on Main Street, across the street from the church.
And that's a decision the board's.
yeah,
Yes.
we have to make that approved.
Okay.
We just
And-
denied
yeah,
one
I
a
understand.
few weeks ago.
Yeah, I know you did.
So-
I've heard all about.
Yeah, all of those coming from. How many licenses do you think Roscoe has right now?
For what?
Gaming,
I don't know.
38. 38.
How many insurance companies do they have?
That's part of it. Sorry if there's any insurance people, but that's part of the issue.
You know, how many hair salons do we have?
So the desire is to
So
attract some.
what else are you looking for?
Or the people who came in to speak to me, one was interested in a bakery. A second person who came in and spoke to me was interested in putting in what I would call a confectionery, ice cream and candy. And she also had a vision of selling, she was a little girl, so selling, you know, earbuds and all kinds of things, a bit of retail. Those were of interest.
And we don't have those spaces available.
No, no. Mm-mm.
We don't really have them available anywhere in Roscoe.
Why hasn't anybody
Not
been
just Main
interested in the location? I can't think of the address, but it's near the barber shop. Next to Coventry, is it?
They've been trying to put gaming in that one, the one that just got updated.
Oh, Lucky Lock?
Yeah. Yeah, we've had two people try to put gaming in it. I
That's a
believe.
perfect place for both of those businesses
No,
that you mentioned.
Oh, those, but
That's a rent issue, I think.
yes, the
Yeah,
the
that's
rent- the
landlord.
rental, the rental.
He wants a
was
mortgage
exorbitant.
for it.
And it wasn't built out, so not only did the prospective interested entrepreneur have to undergo the cost of total renovation of the interior to how they were going to do it, and the exorbitant rent. So there was no return on investment for them. And that was what I got from two different people.
And that's what you find a lot in, you know, building, commercial buildings, building apartments,
Mm.
you know. The guy who's putting the money up wants to get a decent return out of it. When costs are going way up here and you're, you know, wanting to have some nice looking facade, it's pretty hard to do with what the rental market is. Sure, the rents have gone up, but there's still a lot. I mean, you drive up and down here, I see rental signs all the time. You know, places for rent, houses for rent, this is for rent, that's for rent. I drove by a building I used to live in, it was up for rent.
Roscoe?
Not in Roscoe, in Rockford, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's, we're thinking just Roscoe.
I know, but I'm just saying, there's a lot of stuff that's around here that, you know, is, you know, higher priced, and we don't have a lot of, you know, people coming in to rent. All those buildings out over there behind the Walgreens and that stuff went just like that.
Housing, yes.
Housing, yeah,
The village of
but they're getting a
Roscoe,
good rate of return on what they're getting there.
of course, and so,
And if I'm an investor, that's what interests me.
of course,
How much money can I make?
how fast can you make it? And Roscoe was blessed to have, out of all of Winnebago County, more housing starts than any other place. However, where the houses are going are where you already have the infrastructure, where they could easily hook up to sewer and water.
Well,
Deep pocket developers where they have to run their own have not been knocking. And then those
but I
developers.
see why you're wanting to do this, to attract those guys to come in, to make it more viable for them to put up, you know, the stuff, you know, that you're looking for Main Street. I get it. I like the idea of, you know, building to the property line here. You got all the infrastructure right out on Main Street. It's there.
Yeah.
You got water, you got sewer, you got everything.
If you have people downtown, people will support the businesses and businesses will come. So it's kind of a case of which comes first, the chicken or the egg, the business or people.
So what
people or
time can I
business.
see you tomorrow?
Got time
Yes,
after the meeting.
yes, let me know. State Line Mass Transit at 9:30 should be back by 10:30.
10:30.
There we go.
Giddy up.
So we wanna,
I did have one other quick one about the material you presented. I didn't hear any conversation of the mixed use properties where you put some small businesses down below and then some residentials above. The residentials did not include any discussion of condominiums.
you could go.
Yeah, we're not getting into those specifics yet. That was more so just from a built environment standpoint, what would be. So we want to, before we wrap up today, we want to talk about a concept plan that we've talked through with the village. So this is a really exciting opportunity to build out that kind of, we mentioned before, what's that beginning stage, right? Before you get to that final vision of a fully built out downtown, what are those initial investments that you can make on really tactical properties within the downtown to drive visitation, to drive the growth and interest in downtown? And so one of these sites, 5473 Main Street is, we're looking at with the village in partnership with Hananiga High School, the creation of a pop-up retail center, park and plaza. And so.
Just a little bit of context to this, and then you
Yeah.
go, since you've been on the journey, but in terms of looking at some other communities where we identified earlier, Batavia, Geneva, Hawaii, all the lists that became a lot of places, not just in Illinois. And we started asking what are some amenities in those communities that you really like. And one that emerged from Batavia, it's called Batavia Shops. And it's a pop-up retail commercial space. I don't know if any of you have been into downtown Batavia. I finally got that chance to actually go check it out, and it fits right in with the downtown. So that's some of the inspiration for this. Sorry, I just had to.
No, absolutely.
What's that?
I own the car wash that was right there where you're talking. I know.
Batavia?
Yeah. So that's right on Hodges where you're talking.
Yeah, right at the corner of Hodges Run and Main Street. We have this site here that we're looking at bringing in really a great mix of pedestrian infrastructure, public space, recreation space, and really just creating a community amenity right here in downtown. And so, at a bird's eye view, we're really looking at a lot of things. How do we create this as a really pedestrian friendly space? You've got a mixed use, multi-use path coming right along Main Street here that folks are going to be using to get to the site. We want to make sure that folks can access the site, make sure that there are ample pedestrian crossings, but also not neglecting the issue of parking, right? For this concept, we're looking at providing ample both on-street and on-street parking spaces that are well above the current requirements. But the really exciting aspect of this development are these pop-up shops. So these are small 13 by 12 foot, small retail pods that can house a small business, really create an accessible space for entrepreneurs to establish themselves. And really just create, how can you introduce a lot of commercial activity, a lot of walkability and engagement within a small space? How do you allow this to seamlessly integrate with a green space towards the rear of the property, right? We wanted to say, okay, if we're generating a lot of activity towards Main Street, how do we ensure that that's not kind of clashing with lower density residential uses here? So we created this green space and buffer area that's a naturalized playground that creates that buffer, and it creates this green space that's very well integrated with the rest of this development. We're also looking at how can you utilize the on-street parking on Main Street here to bring in food trucks and allow for that kind of commercial activity and really turn this into a plaza that has a lot of commercial activity here in Roscoe. And so, just kind of running through a couple of those street views of renderings, and we're really trying to look at how can you incorporate public seating, how can you incorporate a lot of green space, and really turn this into, even though this is a kind of development that's not really common or really non-existent in Roscoe, how do you make it so that this is a viable 365-day a year public space and not just a retail space? And so those are some of the considerations we've taken into account. So just some additional renderings
The
here.
one in Batavia, it's only seasonal, right? It's not.
Yeah.
March to December. Yeah.
And so the idea here is that, like, yes, in warm months and even in the cold months, you can have the retail here, but how do you make this just a nice public space for folks in Roscoe, even without the retail component to it? So really turning into this pedestrian plaza and having that recreation component here in the rear. really makes this so that it's accessible to all ages and all times of the year. And so, yeah, please go ahead.
This model of commercial development, right? So we talk about that conversation of probably not the big bakery, but this is really can become the feeder into future tenant spaces along Main Street or anywhere within the village. Sometimes it doesn't make sense for someone as their business is growing, that Main Street is the right corridor for their business. Like you say, some people they're looking for specific requirements. But this really, as a community, you have an opportunity. There are a lot of people who they can't get into 1,200, 2,000 square feet. The business model just doesn't work yet, right? But as they start to build the customer base, this is real, near home here, what's the city market, right? A lot of businesses that actually you've seen over the last decade go from a food truck or go from a vendor space, and now they're in multiple locations right? So that's similar here, if you've experienced that. So that's the thought.
What kind of public facilities are you gonna have? I mean, because a 12 by 13, that's the size of a bedroom. You can't get a public bathroom in there and have a retail space.
Glad you asked that. No portlets. There will be one building that will be the restroom.
Oh.
Yes.
It'll probably be in the back, yeah.
For the area.
Will it be in the center of this?
Somewhere in here, so we may tweak this sign a little bit to accommodate that common area.
No, I think something else is relevant to bring up here is the reason why we're looking at something like this is we had this room filled up when a developer came to us and wanted to do something there. I think it was a mechanic shop and sell cars. And that neighborhood showed up here and filled this room and said, hey, we don't want that to happen. So ultimately, pardon me?
I'm seeing it. I live there, so I'm seeing it right now.
So, so,
Yes.
so we listen to the constituents, says we don't want that. So we did not approve
How
that.
do you feel about this?
Actually, I'm not against it. My only concerns would be who would maintain the public restrooms? How do we ensure that they are, something that,
Property.
and the overall properties that fall on the village? And then knowing the current traffic patterns on Hodges Run, having parking right there, I'm having trouble visualizing how that's gonna impact my life. In a good way.
Yeah.
And so those things would need to be addressed. Hodges Run is a very narrow street. We should not allow any parking on it at any time. In my opinion, it's ridiculous with school buses and on-street parking on both sides of the street. And I would just hope that all of that would be addressed, and I'm sure that it would.
Probably not needed,
But I don't object to this as much as I did, and it was
Multi-family.
multi-family apartments that he wanted to build in there with their backs to the streets and just, be like their own little community, which I didn't see any benefit from that to our existing community.
Well, thanks for coming again.
Yeah.
So again, these are ideas. None of this is down, but we're trying to come up with some ideas that take everybody's consideration in that particular
Our
case.
initial plans for 8 of those right now with the build out. Batavia had 10, I think. And they're adding 2 more, I believe. Kind of a neat concept about what we're also, and it's not okayed yet, but Onondaga High School is going to build these.
So what are
I mean,
they?
I
Batavia-
think it could be quite charming.
Batavia High School built the ones that are in Batavia. We have a local contractor company that has also jumped aboard that's gonna help do the finish with them if it all goes through. But the plan is, and I don't mind sharing, one of those units, Joe, our village administrator, came up with a great idea is to give the high school one of those units. Make them come up their entrepreneurship class and their marketing class to come up with a business plan. And you guys, as a high school, this is yours, build it out, sell something, do something with it, and really bring a community effort into this as well.
Why there? Why not say a Riverside Park or over at County Park where the urban area was?
Can't do Riverside.
This has electricity and infrastructure. And the topography lends itself to it. And it will drive people to Main Street. Again, it's the idea to get people to linger here by Main Street, spend some money on Main Street.
What else would you put there? If you want to bring people to downtown and increase our tax base, what do you put there?
Okay, so I guess that's where I'm having trouble. I don't really see a need to bring people down.
So it sits there for another 28 years with nothing on it. I'm just asking.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, that is the way that I feel. I mean.
That's fine.
I
No, I'm just
like
asking.
the openness of it. I don't know why we have to try to be something that we're not. I mean, there's.
No, we're not. We haven't tried it.
I can tell you what we are. We are a street with depressed housing.
How many
stock.
insurance agents?
You have houses that are 80 to 100 years old, and many of them cannot be rehabilitated. And they sit on big lots. Now, that may have been appropriate and it was great. I'm old enough to remember when this was the main street to get up to Wisconsin. And so these big houses and big lots was kind of charming because it was outdoors and well, it was rural, shall we say, but it was a pass-through. It's so changed now. And I hear what you're saying, but it's not what younger people are looking for. It's not what younger families are looking for. They want a sense of community, but their sense of community is to not have to drive to Janesville or Madison to find something to do with their children or to spend some of their recreational time. And they want to have more choices in restaurants. They want to spend their dollars there. They don't want to always have to go to Target or McChesney. And so we want to help them realize that. And Roscoe doesn't have retail, so we are building retail. I went to an open house on Saturday and there was a lady who made jewelry. And I was telling her about this. She gave me 5 cards and said, don't forget me. I want to go into one of those spaces. Let me know when you're going to open. There is this desire here to be part of Roscoe. We just don't have the facilities.
What kind of rental income do you think you'll get?
It won't be as high as Batavia. I've looked at theirs and
There's a gentleman
What do you
who's
think?
been
it's a little pricey.
Well, yeah, we're way early stages,
Right.
still, but.
But I mean, you gotta have some kind of
Of
idea.
course, yes.
It's gonna be low.
And we plan to partner with the Small Business Association.
You looked at $1,000 a month per unit.
Yeah, way too early.
Yeah, way too-
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
It's coming.
Yeah, this is literally concept plan.
Like,
It's not
just,
even the first
Yes,
time
that's
public
great.
tonight.
I mean,
So,
Well, part of the concept is,
yeah,
what are we going to do? And then we will have the business plan. And there has been an overwhelming amount of interest from just people we speak to. Back to the meeting this afternoon at Honolulu High School for the cabinetry class. And the youngsters there were making wonderful items here. Chairs and coffee tables and all that kind of stuff. And they want an outlet for some of these things. Well, we've got a perfect place for them to do that and then the dollars to do.
I got a gentleman back here.
And he's wanted to talk.
My question is, where the tree line is back there, how do you keep the properties protected from the development area?
So the couple of things, so this is a rendering, not actual amount, amount and type of trees. We'll have to, that'll be a part of the design phase where we start to think about the landscaping buffer between this area and the homes that are abutting. I don't know if we'll need to berm it. So, but those are the discussions that we will need to have in terms of how do we have that delineation between the houses.
My concern is we're not gonna have people walking into our backyards.
Right. No,
No.
I mean, yeah, we can look at, in terms of fencing solution. Those are things, we didn't put that in this stage yet, but those are like the parking along Hodges Run. I'm glad you said that, because we actually went back and forth on, well, how much parking does supply don't, right? So the conversation we've been having, and then the same with the buffer here of how does this playground become an asset and amenity to the neighborhood, as well as a commercial. So I'm gonna write that down in terms of our next design iteration of what is the buffer and making sure people can't go into your yard.
And the pop-up facilities, are they all gonna be the same style? Or are you gonna have an assortment of different?
Probably all by 12 by 12. Hopefully, maybe a different color, but we're not sure.
I hope they
Different
have
temperatures.
Yeah.
That's easy. But just to kind of go over this for everyone, like, this is in real time, like, I'm seeing this at the same
absolutely,
time you're
yes.
seeing it.
Right.
So it's just a concept plan at this point. It's just to give ideas and have your feedback on what you would like to see integrated, like a fence, you know, what we're gonna do to buffer it. And then the other question that was raised, who's going to maintain this? The village owns this property. So it'll be maintained like any other village property we have, any park, it'll be mowed, it'll be shoveled, you know, it'll be maintained by us, so we will make sure it's maintained properly.
Restaurants or the restroom maintained on a daily
Right.
basis.
Right.
Right,
So it's a clean, inviting,
right.
safe.
It's not
space.
some third party person that owns this.
There'll be probably ample lighting
Yeah.
in that area too, which we don't have.
Yeah, I think one of the points here, this is just an idea rendering, but once you get to the point where it's actually designed, all these questions are defined and specific. You know, just like in Hawks Point, where we're working on the final design for that, the berm, trees, the fence, all that stuff would be in that, but this is just an idea.
Understood, but it hits very close to
Sure,
home.
sure, sure.
for us, because- So we can't help but go to those
Yeah.
details right away.
Yeah.
because It will impact my neighbors.
We hope you keep showing up every
Yeah,
week.
You know, and my dear friends, the Franiacs who live right here.
This
on
is
their
a
beautiful
lot better,
property
it's a
will
lot better
so
than what
impact.
was gonna go in there.
That's what we're saying.
This is very helpful.
Right, that's why we want your
Really
feedback, so we know what.
And that's why we're happy that you're here. We ran on a platform, we want to hear from the constituents, we want to listen to, and that's the kind of, that's how we made the decision to not let what was gonna go in there. Couple of things.
This Mr. Christmas will appreciate it.
He was one of the people that showed up on a regular basis during that time. So we're happy that we at least got it, and it's a green space right now, so we can decide what to do with it with your input, so.
Not to be flippant. Raise your hand if you think a fountain is a good idea in this space.
Or a gazebo.
Right here, right next to his car wash, I guess.
I think it's a great idea. Have it run all winter too. You know, nice culture.
You wouldn't be one throwing soap in there every weekend?
No, I won't. I think it's a nice thing. The more aesthetic things you
something
can
that-
put in,
Up
that
lit,
people see,
something.
get the right.
And again, we're talking, you know, this will be lit, the parking will be lit, we'll be lighting, you know, from
Into a nice there, right?
So it's something to be
Absolutely. And we will-
aware of is how much lighting is tolerable. How much is tolerable?
The one that's really.
Types of lighting and then they will be excellent at the lighting. They'll adjust the lighting and the types of lighting and the.
Yeah, there's gotta be different type of lighting, right? So you don't get that into the backyards versus right on the main street.
So you may, at one end, you're gonna have a 3 to 4 story building, and then the other end, you're gonna have
That
like
was
these,
the- that
so
was-
there's no consistency.
That was just an example of what might go on there. We're not building a three-story building.
I'm
Nobody
sure you've
comes
seen
and asking to do
Roscoe,
it.
where there's a little street right across from Settlers Park, 2 stories.
Yes.
So, you know, business on the bottom and then an apartment on the top. Have you looked at something like that? That at least has a little more of a, we did.
That is the type of model that we're looking at.
Well, no, I'm hearing you say you want to increase density. So density you build up. These are only, 2-story buildings.
So I know it's a technical back and forth, but density is the number of units, right? So when you go above 1 story, that's adding density. So whether it's 2, 3, 4, or 20. What I wanted to be very clear, especially as we're hearing from you, right? This is also part of the feedback is you're not seeking a high level of density, but we also know that we can't do single family houses on Main Street, right? So but what you just described in Rockton is exactly what we're talking about here. And a lot of main streets that you walk through, you'll be amazed at how many units that's why I show those examples, because it's like, that's 12 units and you go 12 units. But that's the beauty of the architecture, and having the right developers that get the community's values. These communities they have set the bar for the development community, and the return on investment is there for the developer too. So I just want to say, yeah, what you just described.
That two-story thing can easily work in with historic houses. I mean, I'm also hearing that there's a trend now for the village to buy historic houses and just tear them down. You know, so I think that's.
Where did you hear that trend?
Well, I know that 5466 is coming down.
Yeah, well, she's saying it's not usable, it's too old.
Oh.
Yeah, we did look at it too.
In design and architecture.
We did look at it and all that, and the way it's laid out and everything, it was gonna be way too expensive to turn it into an actual business or retail
But
front.
you didn't give a business person a
Right,
chance
and
to
then
purchase it.
also-
Even the other one on Main Street, the white one.
Main Street too, we're redesigning that, and a lot of our off-street or on-street parking is going away. So we are going to have places where we do have parking lots and stuff along Main Street.
You're talking about the LaBrie.
Good questions. I've been taking notes too, especially on this last concept, and this won't be the last time. We need to go through iterations with the trustees on the concepts and then ultimately getting more resident feedback on those designs. So this is not, I just want to be clear, not a one and done. This is really the first time we went live with this concept of the community. So one, we are past our time. Happy to take questions outside, but I want to look to trustees, Carol, Joe.